Welcome everyone. This talk is about 10 years of our Open API. It's closed now, spoiler alert. And I will tell you a little bit about our learnings, the dangers of using an Open API, what we can do about it, the risks that we have had, and what we might do in the future, hopefully. So my name comes later. First, Car2Go devs. I'm representing the developers, the engineers of Car2Go. We post regular on Twitter about, let's say, life at Car2Go and the problems we solve in the engineering team and the product creation team. So be sure to check that out. My name is Sumit Kumar. I'm also on Twitter, of course, and on my personal website. If you want to reach out later and ask me questions, of course you can do that here. You can also do that via those channels. So a little bit of history first. Who actually here knows Car2Go and uses Car2Go maybe even? Okay, knowing is a lot there. There are people who don't know Car2Go, so I explain a little bit what it is. We have these beautiful little cars and big ones, Smart and Mercedes right now, and it's free-floating car sharing. You can go via an app to the car, open it, hop in and drive somewhere, drop it off wherever you want. Almost. So this is it, basically. You drive yourself compared to ride-hailing apps like MyTaxi or Uber. And you might have heard in the news that we will merge with DriveNow. And so next year you will probably also have BMW and Minis in these apps. So the history of the Open API is a little bit different, of course. It started, Car2Go in general started in 2008 and 2009 and launched only with a website and an API. So it was basically, from the start, they said, okay, let's do an Open API and see what developers build with it. And we were able to reserve and book cars via the website. Then hundreds of products and developers used the Open API over the years. They included it in their own products and stuff. I will get to this. So it was pretty successful for us. The documentation was hosted on Google Code. I don't know if you remember this. The GitHub competitor of Google was shut down now, so we also had the documentation on GitHub later. Our docs and design were kind of bad. I will also get to that later. It's definitely something that is a learning for us, and if you open up your API, you should be aware that especially your engineers are judged by this. And we had lack of resources to take care of it. So the Open API was treated a little bit as a, not as a first-class citizen. So we had our rental process and everything, and the Open API kind of worked. It did. We built a lot of cool stuff with it. Also internally we used it, but it was not as polished as, let's take Stripe as an example or something. So we definitely could have done better in that department, and as I said, it was closed in 2018. I will also get to the reasons why. Okay, but what impact does an Open API have in general to the business, to the product, to the developers? The first part I want to get at is the external developers, the developers that use the Open API. They create features, and this is not just a hope, for us at least, it was the case. We launched only with the website, and when the iPhone launched and the App Store and all of that, our applications on iOS and Android were created by external developers. And even later, when we built them ourselves, the Windows Phone app and BlackBerry and all of this, it was done by external developers first, because they simply had the need themselves, and they did it, which I think is kind of amazing. So they brought the product to these platforms, and I think everyone with an Open API can benefit from this if you are not on these platforms currently. Then feature testing, of course. As soon as we have new features and they are available via the Open API, you have developers immediately jumping on it, testing it out, and pressuring you a little bit into better API design as well. So this is kind of nice. Security tests, of course, if you open up the API, this is a security test in itself, and people will try to take advantage as much as possible. You have other product integrations, so any example will do, like on Google Maps, for example, you could reserve a Car2Go. This was not the case. Google did not integrate Car2Go, but in general, via the Open API, you can integrate it in any product you want, which is nice. Our sister company Movil, for example, integrated it as well as some competitors and aggregators. And then the one point is also developer acquisition. So if people use our Open API, they are great developers, they care about the product, they use it. So of course we reach out, try to help them, they try to help us, and maybe sometimes we can even hire them full-time in our team. Product creation in general, I mentioned it already. One part is moving to other platforms, but there is also a bigger part where people simply create new products or features in itself. So the iOS app and the Android app I would consider products, and feature creation above was something like the radar feature that we have. So where you get alerted when there is a car available nearby. These features can also be done by external devs, and some of them were done by external devs before we did it. So we could take a look what they do, how they do it, and learn from it, which is absolutely fantastic. This is our iOS app. Again, I mentioned already, the first iteration was done by an external developer. Then, of course, research and development and some other stuff like recruiting. If you have an Open API, it's amazing to give out to people that apply, engineers that apply for coding challenges, for example. In a lot of times when you don't have an Open API, it's not as easy to just send something out. If you have employees or hackathons or something like this and they want to quickly use data, it's amazing if you have an Open API, you just send out the documentation and it's done. Student projects, we supported a lot at universities, from schools that learn programming for the first time to PhD degrees and studies where we supported them. One of the PhD studies, or two of them actually, one was in Stanford and one was in the Technical University in Munich. It was about fleet distribution, like how do you distribute cars in a city, how do you have to relocate them to make the business profitable and the user happy and all of this. So this is a lot of data science. They needed a lot of data and they aggregated via our Open API, for example. Hackathons I already mentioned. We sponsor and participate a lot on hackathons, and we bring this API as well so people can integrate it in their whatever they build. This is, for example, one of our early relocation tools where you see you have a lot of geodata, polygons everywhere. So we separate the city into different polygons. Then the dots here are cars basically, and the algorithms in the back calculate which cars should be relocated, where should they go, where are they ideally in the next hour, for example, because we know there is demand and they get used in the future. So these applications were all powered by the Open API. Additionally, and external developers even use the API, or external data scientists use the Open API as well to analyze this. So there are studies out there, or papers or whatever, that completely independent people wrote about our business, car sharing in general, used our data, and this is amazing for us. I mean, sometimes we just discover an article on Medium analyzing all of our stuff and be like, damn, man, we need a workshop or something to check this out and work on it. So this is pretty great. Of course, our product got improved as well. Better documentation, simply because if you put something on GitHub now and the documentation sucks and it's popular or a popular brand, you will get the feedback that is necessary. In retrospect, or in turn, the developers improve the documentation. They know they have, and they learn that this is, a regular part. Documentation is part of developing, of writing software, and in turn, this also means our internal documentation gets better, which is amazing. The external feedback I already mentioned, API design, all of this kind of stuff. So every developer that works on this learns by interacting with the community, with a tech product that is used by outside engineers. Best practices, of course, are used, and again, we are judged by it. It improves internal systems as well. So as developers learn, get better, maybe even work together with external developers, this trickles down into our internal systems as well. This is one of our latest additions to rate the trip that you had, and this data that we get there, for example, is not public, at least right now, but the data that we have there in the background, we use it for amazing stuff to do some kind of, if we aggregate all the rating data, you can build maps of where people do shit with the car. I don't know who uses Car2Go. You might know that cars are dirty. This is our biggest problem right now, and you won't believe what people do with the cars sometimes. And this data helps us, for example. So if you can, rate your trip so we can fix this problem by a lot of data science. It also had an effect on our business, better documentation. I had this already, I guess. So let's move on. The dangers that we have with the Open API. And this is where it's really hard to tell your managers that you want an open API. So if you go to your managers and you say, look, let's open up specific parts of our business, of our data, they will look at this, so it's quite important for us. Security is the first one, of course. I mean, most of you, I guess, are engineers, especially backend engineers, so security is the biggest concern of management. Yeah, I mean, authentication and all of that, I guess you know this, but you saw currently Facebook was hacked, LinkedIn, Sony, all these big data breaches, and anyone in a decision-making process is, of course, scared of that. Then the data aggregation. This is the most interesting to me. We had our Open API delivered the locations where Car2Go operates and the available cars right now in the city with the real address. So if you fetch the API right now and get, for example, in Hamburg, 500 free or 500 available cars, including their location, and you do this in a minute again, then the cars have changed. So by this, you see which cars were driven and which didn't. And if you do this every minute for every day for the whole year, you have a pretty accurate map of how many rentals we have, where the people rented the cars, where they're driven, and all of this stuff. So our competitors did this, of course, and they had a quite accurate picture of our business and how it's going, which nobody liked in our management, of course. So this was the biggest gripe with the Open API. Then, of course, you get gatekeepers. There are applications that integrate the service Car2Go in that case. One example is Movil, another is Free2Move, where you can use all kinds of mobility services. And just imagine if they attract the users more than we do for years, and they cause 30% of your traffic, the whole business model is to that point that they gain more traffic, or a huge chunk of the traffic that we depend on them. So at some point they will come to us and say, look, we will shut your service out now, except if you give us money. So this is where the Open API is also feeding people that basically build walls around us, use our service, give it to the users, forward the users to us, and we are at some point dependent on them. This is what Twitter, for example, is pretty scared about. I mean, maybe you've worked with the API before, but the third-party Twitter clients are very restricted now. This was a simple case like that as well. We have copycats too. So Car2Go was not that hit by this, but Twitter is. So again, Twitter has lots of third-party clients, and if Twitter would open up the API completely, I mean, they would not get any users on their front-facing or consumer-facing platforms anymore. They would not gain any ad revenue and something like this. So copycats are a big problem if you serve the main data for your business model out to everyone without any limits or restrictions and something like this. The infrastructure. People build stuff on hackathons. Students build stuff, and they sometimes create infinite loops that query your API all day long, and maybe deploy it and forget about it. The next version is somewhere else. So if you have your infrastructure on two servers in the basement and your whole business is on that, and somebody does it with your Open API, you better shut it down really fast. So infrastructure is something that is very important if you have a popular Open API, right? If you have a simple one, it doesn't matter, but a big one, especially if you use custom infrastructure, custom, I mean not like AWS or something, but some things from maybe your big parent company, like we did in the past. This might be a big issue for this. API design and docs. I mentioned it already. In the background there is Stripe, because to me Stripe is the golden standard of documentation and API design. It's amazing to use, and frankly we did not came close at all. So our documentation, we got frequent feedback regarding this as well, but again, we had no resources to do it. So if we would start again with this, I think the emphasis on the design and especially the documentation would be much, much higher, because you get judged by it. External developers that maybe want to apply to your company and or to your team and work on it, and they see this on GitHub and they're like, okay, if this is the standard I will be working with, then maybe I go somewhere else. So it's the hard truth basically, and I can only advise you, if you do something in public for your company representing your engineers, then polish it. Polish it at least so you as an engineer are satisfied and would use it. Then, of course, you can minimize these risks, because even though I said a lot of bad things about open APIs, I'm a big advocate for it. So what can you do to do it? So authentication, I don't have to tell you this. This is pretty an obvious one. So put API tokens in, JSON, web tokens, whatever it is. But secure your API so you know who's using it. We had this in the beginning, that it was simply open, I mean really open. We didn't even know who's querying it. So later we had then API keys and all of this, but do it so you know who's using it and who's maybe attacking you or aggregating your data or whatever. Rate limits is something that we didn't have at all, but I think most of the big APIs that are products now have rate limits. So Google Maps and all of this, they have like, I don't know, 50,000 queries free, and after that you pay. So this is a very effective tool also to open up new revenue streams for your company. And this is, of course, a big plus if you have to convince management to do a new open API. So if you just want to do it to please developers, they may say, no, it's not our business, but if you can earn money with it, it's a whole new game, and you get also a whole different set of resources to build it. So this is quite amazing. I don't know if this would be the case for us. We have to see what the demand would be. But in general, so for now, we didn't have anything like this. Monitoring, you want to know what's happening. This is also something we didn't really have. So we have now all of our internal systems monitored. I don't want to say that, but the open API was not. It was like you just didn't know. And even if it would return some 500 errors or something, we didn't know. And if you think today about it, it's absolutely insane, but I mean, this was 2008 where it started, and after the years after, it was almost not maintained anymore. So you gotta have monitoring if you open up something to the public, so you immediately know when something shady is happening. And then, of course, pro hosting. I put Google in the background, but it doesn't matter. Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, AWS, these are the pros, and you can scale, you get security, all these kind of features. Monitoring is mostly included. Host with them and not on a Raspberry Pi somewhere. Yeah, especially if your business is on the same servers. So, I mean, a lot of companies are forced to use specific infrastructure. We have been there as well. We are part of Daimler, and at Daimler you can't just go to Google with your data. So it was a bit difficult for us. And if you need to use a custom warehouse, a custom data center that, for example, belongs to your parent company, and your business is there, don't put your open API on there. You don't want any attacks or something to turn down the rest of your business. The open API can go down, our customers will still be able to use the applications. Adapt and evolve. 2008, it's 10 years, so things change, your competitors change, your requirements change, your user base changes, and you should adapt to it. Also something we didn't do. So check out what's new. Simply, evolve the API, evolve the documentation, put new features in, put old stuff out, do some breaking changes to get rid of technical debt. So don't do it and then leave it there. Treat it as a product. Your open API should be a product just like the rest of your products or businesses that you do. If you have an open API and treat it as a product, ideally use it yourself inside the company, then I think you can really unlock a lot of potential and open a lot of doors to additional use cases. This is something, again, we didn't do, but I'm advocating a lot for it. I'm advocating a lot that we get a new open API in the future. We have currently some, let's say, other priorities with the merger and everything, but maybe next year I can tell you another talk that hopefully is a bit more positive on that note, but in general, this is something that I really want. I enjoy to build stuff for other developers and engage with them, and so did the rest of Car2Go. So this was the 10 years of Car2Go. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, shoot them out now. Thanks for listening. Okay, so questions, not only OpenAPI, you can basically anything regarding engineering Car2Go if you are interested. Yes.
Can I just shout?
Yeah, totally fine. I will repeat the question.
Right. You mentioned that now the API is closed. Can you speak a bit about why that is? Is that mainly because of the dangers that you've seen?
Yes, it's the competitors that got too much insight into the business and the data aggregation. So the gatekeepers. These were the biggest parts for us. We shut them down. They got around it anyway. So I mean, if they parse our applications, they will see what's happening. You can rebuild the queries and the requests, and then the legal guys get involved, and then the engineers are out. So this was the main reason. So it wasn't that we don't want to support. I mean, our slogan is proud to share, right? So we want to do this, and we want to open source more as well. But we need to figure out how to protect the business first, and then we can do this again.
And then are there any plans to make some parts open again?
So the question was if we plan to open up stuff again. I can't tell you any plans. I can tell you I root for it. What I can tell you is that we have a different API now. We call it Simulation API that basically serves the exact same data, but let's put it this way. If you have Berlin, or let's use Hamburg, you have the different districts and a car separated there. And we simply generate these cars. We don't have, it's not the exact same number. It's similar, plus minus 10 or something. The locations are random, but the heat map of where the locations of the cars are is the same to our current model, which means you can use this to build an application. You have fuel levels that go down over the day. You have the same distribution, like at the end of the day people drive outside of the city, in the morning they drive inside. All of this you have via our simulation API as well. But we didn't document this publicly on GitHub or something. We just have it for us, for code challenges, for hackathons where we bring this, but we don't advertise it a lot. The simulation API in general can also be very powerful to simulate how a car sharing fleet moves across the city over weeks and stuff. So you can build really, really cool things with this as well. But again, a real open API with real data, also dating back, would be even more amazing.
Thanks.
No problem. Okay. Any other questions? Can't see up there. No. Yes.
You mentioned a gold standard for...
Golden standard for API design, yes.
Is Stripe or what?
Yes, Stripe is a payment provider. So if you want to integrate credit cards in your product, like online shop or whatever, Stripe is one way to do this. I mean, other people use PayPal maybe, or Aiden is a big one now. We currently, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, switch to Stripe. You didn't hear that, but now you do. Now you know. So we had a different one before, custom. It sucked. Now we switched to Stripe, and it's amazing. And with it's Stripe.com, it's again a payment provider, and the API docs of it and the API design is, I don't know any better. It's absolutely insane and amazing how much effort they put in. And if you have to write documentation, big documentations, look at this. Look at how they do it. How if you log in, they already put the API keys for you inside the documentation. You know, so you can easily copy paste stuff. You can test out things directly from within. It's an amazing documentation, and they have quite a big team on it.
By the way, it's not just cards.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking tomorrow at 4 p.m. if you want to learn more.
Are you from? Oh, you're from Stripe. I love him. All right. Okay. Any other questions? No. No. Okay. If there are coming up, just hit me up. I will be at the Car2Go booth outside, probably with the Stripe guy, and have a nice lunch.